Ever feel like we're living through history, but like at warp speed? I mean,
Yeah.
1 minute everyone's talking about tiny homes and then bam, it's all AI designing skyscrapers.
It's moving so fast.
Well, for today's deep dive, we're going to try to keep pace with that change. We're taking a look at how one country is getting ready for the future of housing.
And not just a few years down the line. We're talking all the way to 2032.
Oh yeah, this isn't some pie-in-the-sky theoretical stuff. This is South Korea's game plan.
Their playbook for how they're going to tackle things like housing affordability, changing demographics, even how to make those apartments a little less, shall we say, lively with the noise.
Lively is one word for it. Okay, playbook's a good way to put it, because we're actually looking at an official document here. The third long-term housing plan, straight from the South Korean government.
Straight from the source.
So are you ready to get a little policy wonky today?
Oh, absolutely. Let's do it. This document is fascinating, and they lay out their whole vision. Hopes are raised, burdens are reduced, realizing housing stability for the people.
I like it. Catchy.
But it's the how they're going to get there that's really interesting.
Right. Like, they're not messing around. They have specific targets for how many new homes to build each year.
It's granular.
And get this, they even have a goal for, get this, the number of houses per 1,000 people.
They have to.
It's that detailed.
You've got to think about South Korea. Super dense population, especially in cities like Seoul. Now imagine that, but the population's getting older and needing different kinds of housing than, say, a generation ago. This plan is about getting ahead of those big shifts that are happening.
Okay, so it's like they're playing 4D chess with bricks and mortar.
That's a good way to put it.
Before we get into the nuts and bolts of it all, can you give us the quick download? Why is this plan such a big deal?
This goes way beyond just, construction permits and zoning laws. We're talking about some of the biggest challenges South Korea is facing today. Like, we're talking a rapidly aging population, changing job market, the environment. They're looking at housing as a way to help address all of these things, which is kind of wild when you think about it.
It's a tall order for sure.
Yeah. It's about building a future where everyone has a place to live, of course, but it's also about making those homes sustainable, adaptable to people's needs as their lives change. I mean, it's really ambitious.
Like they're trying to future-proof their entire society, one apartment building at a time.
That's a good way to look at it. And they've even gone so far as to set this goal of completely reshaping the residential landscape by 2032.
Wow. Okay. Now that is ambitious. So how do they plan on pulling all of this off? What's the master plan here?
So their strategy, they've broken it down into 4 key pillars.
Yeah.
Think of them like the foundation for this whole housing revolution. And each pillar tackles a different part of the problem.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. What's that first pillar all about? All right, hit me with it. What's that first pillar? What's the foundation of this whole thing?
So pillar number 1 is all about stabilizing the housing market.
Okay.
Sounds pretty straightforward, right?
Sure. I mean, every government on the planet probably has that on their wish list.
Right.
But something tells me there's more to it than that when it comes to South Korea.
Oh, you're definitely picking up what we're putting down here. So we're talking supply and demand, right? But on a massive, like almost unbelievable scale. Okay, so imagine building enough homes each year to house a city the size of Oakland, California.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we are not talking about your average run-of-the-mill suburban sprawl development here.
No, not at all. They're really laser focused on urban areas, making cities more livable, more efficient. Like they want to redevelop those older neighborhoods, but not just come in with a book of regulations a mile long.
Right.
They're actually proposing support, to encourage development.
Okay.
That's both appealing and sustainable.
So less concrete jungle, more, European village vibes? Is that what we're going for here?
Yeah, exactly. Think walkable streets, green spaces, those charming low-rise buildings you might see in like Amsterdam or Copenhagen. That's kind of the aesthetic they seem to be going for.
Okay, I like the sound of that. But where are they going to put all these new homes? South Korea, it's already packed tighter than a suitcase at a souvenir shop. Where are you going to put everyone?
Right. Well, that's where it gets really interesting. They're getting creative with space. So imagine this. They're talking about using areas created by burying railway lines underground.
Whoa. Okay, so we're talking about literally digging deep to find more space. That's some serious urban planning judo right there.
And that's just pillar 1. So next up, we're talking about strengthening the housing safety net. And this is where you really start to see South Korea's social priorities come out in this plan.
Okay, housing safety net. Break that down for me. What does that actually look like in practice?
Okay, so think of it this way. There's a safety net for, people's finances, and this is like a safety net for housing. They're planning to massively expand public rental housing, which is a huge deal in a country where private rentals can be ridiculously expensive and competitive.
It's about making sure that everyone has access to a decent, affordable place to live, even if they can't, step onto the property ladder right away.
You got it. But here's the other side of that coin. They also want to help people actually become homeowners.
Right.
So they're talking about making homeownership more attainable, especially for younger generations.
Yes.
The ones who might feel like they're priced out of the market entirely. So think easing those mortgage restrictions, maybe providing some financial assistance, all that good stuff.
Like they're trying to break down those barriers to entry, make owning a house less of a pipe dream and more of a possibility.
Exactly. And there's one more thing I found really interesting about this whole safety net idea. They specifically call out, tackling Jonesy scams.
Jonesy scams.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to need some more explanation on that because I'm guessing that's another one of those things that makes South Korea's housing market kind of unique.
You're exactly right. So Jonesy is this whole rental system where instead of paying monthly rent, tenants give the landlord this huge lump sum deposit, often like a significant chunk of the property's value.
Wait, hold on. So you're basically handing over a mountain of cash up front. That's a pretty bold move.
Yeah, that's the norm in South Korea.
Yeah.
And the tenant, they live rent-free for the lease term, which is usually a couple years. But as you can imagine, it's a system that can be, ripe for scams.
Oh, yeah. I can see how that could go south in a hurry.
Yeah, so landlords might take on more debt than they can handle, or worse, disappear with the tenant's money entirely. Yeah, and those scams, they can be devastating, especially for, young people or those who are new to the market.
That's awful. So what are they planning to do about that?
Well, the plan talks about protecting people from these scams and helping those who've already been victims.
Okay.
So think stronger legal protections, more transparency in the rental market, maybe even some financial assistance to get victims back on their feet.
Okay, so that's 2 pillars down. We've got stabilizing the market, making it safer. I'm guessing this next one kind of builds on that foundation, right?
You know it. Pillar 3 is all about taking the long view. They're calling it adapting to a changing society. This is where they're tackling those big demographic shifts that we talked about before.
Okay, so paint a picture for me. Imagine you're designing housing for a country where the average age is rapidly increasing. That's the challenge, right?
Yeah, that's what they're grappling with. And so they're proposing this really interesting idea of life cycle support.
Okay.
So imagine housing assistance that's actually tailored to different stages of your life.
Okay.
So whether you're, a young professional saving for your first place, or you're part of a growing family that needs a bit more space, or, you're a senior citizen looking for that comfortable and supportive living environment.
Right.
They're saying they want to have something in place to kind of meet people where they're at.
It's like they're saying, hey, we know life throws you curveballs. Kids happen. Your knees start acting up. Whatever your housing situation shouldn't add to those stresses.
Yeah, it's about adapting to those changes, and they're not stopping there. This next part is really interesting. Have you heard of silver stays?
Silver stays. Sounds kind of familiar.
Yeah.
I'm drawing a blank, though. Fill me in. What are those?
Okay, so silver stays are these high-quality housing units that are designed specifically for seniors. So think comfortable, supportive living environments that actually catered to their needs. But here's the really unique part. They're actually bringing in the private sector to help develop and even manage these silver stays.
Okay, so it's not just the government trying to go it alone on this.
Exactly. They're encouraging that kind of collaboration and hopefully tapping into some of the expertise, right? The private sector has experience with design, construction, management, and plus, if they can make it financially viable, it could mean a wider range of options and choices for seniors, which is never a bad thing.
Right. Give folks more choices, hopefully at different price points too, right? But we've been talking a lot about, seniors. What about the younger generation, the ones just starting out? Those are probably the folks feeling the squeeze the most in a place like Seoul, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where this whole urban-rural divide comes in. This plan acknowledges that, young people are flocking to those big cities and the rural areas are kind of, shrinking. They're trying to find a way to rebalance things.
Because cramming everyone into Seoul is maybe not the best for a happy society, not to mention sustainable in terms of infrastructure. So how do you convince people to, ditch the bright lights and head out to the countryside?
Well, they're talking about a couple things. Improving infrastructure in those rural areas, attracting businesses, creating jobs, even offering some financial incentives for people to relocate.
So make it more appealing, make it more livable, and crucially, make it make sense economically. But, easier said than done. It's a tough sell when Seoul's got, all the K-pop concerts and robot baristas.
The long game. It's definitely a long game for sure. And success is not, guaranteed by any means. But at least they're acknowledging that the problem exists and they're trying to come up with ways to address it.
Yeah, that's got to count for something, right? All right, so we've covered 3 pillars. What is that final, foundational piece of their housing revolution?
All right, so pillar 4 is all about building for the future, literally building for the future. It's green and future-proof housing. And that's really South Korea's commitment to not just building more homes, but building better homes.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. With climate change and all, you'd hope that any housing plan worth its salt is thinking about sustainability. But what does that actually look like in practice?
So one of the key phrases you'll hear over and over is zero energy buildings, or ZEBs for short.
Zero energy buildings, ZEB. So we're talking about buildings that generate as much energy as they consume.
You got it. South Korea, they're taking their climate impacts seriously, and they're kind of baking those goals right into these housing plans.
So less reliance on fossil fuels, more solar panels on those roofs, that kind of thing.
That's the idea. And it actually goes beyond just energy efficiency. They're also looking at new construction technologies that can make buildings more durable, more resilient in the long run. So think modular homes. Those are the ones that are built off-site in factories, and then they're assembled like on location.
Oh, right. Like Legos, but for grown-ups.
Oh, yeah.
And doesn't that also mean like faster construction, less waste?
Exactly. It's way more efficient, and it can even mean higher quality control because everything's made in, a controlled factory environment.
Okay, so they're thinking about energy efficiency, new build techniques. What else?
Well, they even mentioned smart homes.
Okay.
But here's the interesting part. They're not going all in on every new gadget and gizmo right away. They're actually planning to test some of these technologies out for government housing projects first.
That's a good idea. Work out the kinks, see how it goes, give the government officials, a little taste of the future first, and then, once they've got a system, roll it out.
Exactly. Test it out, see what works, then scale it up.
I like it.
And there's actually this one, really small detail that I found so fascinating. It just speaks volumes about how they're thinking about this.
Okay, all right, you've got to tell me, what is it? What's this little nugget you found?
They want to make apartments quieter.
Okay, that is music to my ears. Noisy neighbors, it's a special kind of torture no matter where you live. What are they talking about? Soundproof walls? Are we going to have noise police? How's this going to work?
It's a whole multi-pronged approach. So stricter noise regulations for new buildings, developing new soundproofing techniques, even just, promoting a culture of being a little more considerate of your neighbors.
It's a 3-pronged attack on noisy neighbors. All right. I'm here for it. I like what they're doing.
It's these small details, it's like they're thinking about the big picture, sure, but they're also thinking about the everyday experience of living in these homes and these communities,
Okay, so let's bring it home for our listeners today. We've gone from this, super dense policy document to a glimpse into the future of housing in South Korea. They're tackling some big challenges, like housing affordability, an aging population, climate change, even those, noisy neighbors. And they're really trying to approach it all with this focus on sustainability, adaptability, creating communities where people can actually thrive.
It's incredibly ambitious. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And as with any grand vision, the real test is going to be in the execution, right?
Right.
But I think it's safe to say that at the very least, South Korea is approaching this with a level of foresight and a genuine desire to build a better future that's really admirable.
Totally. They're thinking long term, they're being creative, and they are not afraid to try new things. Honestly, after the year we've had, a little future forward thinking, I'll take it.
And you know what? It's going to be so fascinating to check back in a few years, see what kind of progress they've made, maybe do a follow-up.
Oh, a part 2. Now that's an episode I would love to do. But until then, dear listeners, keep dreaming of those peaceful, energy-efficient, maybe even robot-equipped apartments of the future. You never know, it could be a reality, not just a government plan.